Hello friends, in this video I wanted to break down a couple of tips and tricks that have helped me along the way to become a zombies aficionado. If you're new to COD Zombies, well, first of all, welcome to the community. This is a very strange place full of passion and toxic fanboys that want to relive the glory days of whatever game that they think is best. And don't think that I'm insulting people here. I am included in this mess, but you know, it's our community and I love it for what it is, and I think when you stick around long enough, you'll love it too. So this is my attempt at a community-driven video. Yes, there are tips and tricks inside of this package, but for the veterans who will watch this video, they will hopefully leave comments from their experience that will be able to further help you in your journey to become the best zombies player of all time. By the way, I understand if you just want to get to the meat and potatoes, so timestamps will be below, but for those who want to listen, let's get into it. Oh, and make sure you stick around until the end of the video because we have some bonus tips that I think are really important, especially for the newcomers, so you're definitely going to want to stick around for that. Ever since the advent of Cold War Zombies, the community has expanded greatly. And while I know a lot of you who watch zombies content are likely to be veterans, as a poll I posted a while ago shows that most people actually started during the World at War and Black Ops 1 days. That being said, there are so many people that have never even played those games, and to be quite honest, I understand maybe you never had the chance to play, as some of you weren't even alive or old enough to really even play video games. And as somebody who identifies as a 100-year-old, it blows my mind when I hear some of the new players out there who say Doris was before their time. Now, while the fact that some people haven't played the original Zombies games is mind-blowing enough, there are actually people who haven't even played Black Ops 3 Zombies or Zombies Chronicles, and they missed out on the whole time period between BO3 and BO4, Infinite Warfare, World War II. They missed all of that. So this video, it's for new players that are new-ish from Cold War to present day. I have a couple of tips and tricks for you if you're having trouble in this game mode or you just want to take up your game a few notches. Also, if there is anything I haven't covered that you think is super important, leave it in the comment section so that we can help each other and show people who want to learn new tricks. My goal here is to make the comment section of this video an ever-evolving thread of helpful information. The last thing I want to say before we dive in here is that most older Zombies players, we find that Cold War is relatively easy, and while there is definitely a more accessible approach to Cold War Zombies, not everybody feels that way. I remember during Cold War's life cycle, there were a lot of people who told me that they hadn't beaten some of the Easter eggs, and this is not including Legion because that one's actually pretty tough, but there are a lot of people who hadn't even beaten Firebase Z or D Machina or even Forsaken, and that's fine. I'm not throwing shade at you. I'm a lifeless loser who just plays too much of this game. That being said, all of these tips and tricks can be applied to Cold War for the most part and all of the previous games that came before it. Because guys, once you get that zombies itch, there's no going back. You're going to want to explore all of the other modes and all of the other games and all of the other content because you're going to be starving for it over the next 2 years. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Tip number 1, never stop moving. This may seem a little obvious, but if you stop moving, you're gonna die. That doesn't mean there aren't periods which you can stand still, like in between rounds would be a good opportunity for that, but you need to be constantly moving, and the faster you can move, the better things will be. This will help avoid zombies swiping at you, projectiles which will track on you, they will be less likely to hit you, it will prevent heavy enemies or mini bosses from being able to grab you and just ruin your day. So again, a little obvious here, but never stop moving. And to add to this little mantra, it's also important, and maybe even more so, to learn how to navigate the maps backward. Training zombies is a very important skill, and you're going to have to lead hordes in certain directions to be successful, and walking backwards is a skill you will have to master in order to be successful with the various techniques we are going to be discussing. The last few movement sets I want to discuss in this first tip are juking and sliding/backsliding. Juking is not as prevalent as it once was. It can still be done. It really stood out all the way up through Black Ops 3, but in the newer games, it really just isn't as necessary, but like I said, it can still be done. In order to juke zombies, you're going to have to move your mouse or your right analog stick really quickly to the left and the right, and I mean super fast. And generally, when you do this, it will prevent you from getting beaten to death, and sometimes it will help you even escape a very tightening horde. Sliding also really helps to avoid getting hit, and it's also really fun to do, especially when you can master it. You can also backslide by jumping off of a ledge or even on the ground and quickly turning around and then just sliding. It'll take a little bit to get used to, but there's nothing better than jumping off of a ledge and then backsliding while slaughtering a bunch of zombies with your favorite weapon. Tip number 2, end of round task completion. If you're like me and you love doing Easter eggs inside of the zombies maps, you'll often find that it's very difficult to complete certain steps when you have zombies pounding in your face. And some of the steps will require that you stand still, which doesn't really bode well with tip number 1. So the best thing that you can do in these situations is to kill 99% of the enemies in the map so that you can control where the last one goes. If you're playing solo, you can always run far away from the task you are trying to complete to lure zombies away and then quickly make your way back, giving you a little bit of a window to do whatever it is you need to do. Also, if you're playing solo in the older games, you can actually make a crawler by using an explosive weapon that will knock the legs off of the zombie, allowing you some time to do whatever it is you have to do before the zombie bleeds out. If you're playing co-op, well, then you can actually have a friend who is the designated zombie holder, so that every time you want to complete a step, your buddy will hold a zombie for you and you can just do what you got to do. There are some caveats to this, particularly in Cold War Zombies. Most of the time, if there is a step that involves dialogue or some cinematic element, the zombies will be pushed aside. However, if you move away from the safe zone or fire your weapon near the zombies that are retreating, they'll come back, so be careful. However, not all of the games treat zombies the same. In BO4, the zombies will eventually bleed out, meaning that you can't do whatever you want forever. But pretty much every game before Black Ops 4 allowed you to hold a zombie so that you could run around the map until your heart's content. Hell, in Zetsubo, there's literally a plant that holds zombies for you. Tip number 3, always be reloading. This is a bit of a weird tip, but let me explain why it's super important to reload frequently, even if you don't need to. Zombies is really a game of moment-to-moment action, and you are constantly trying to survive these small little situations in succession of one another that all add up to a larger situation that we call the zombies experience. When you're running around training zombies and you shoot half your clip and then you need to run the other way to hoard them up again, reload. When you're shooting a mini boss and you fire 3 rounds from your shotgun and you need to reposition, reload. You never know what's around the corner in zombies, and it's better to have a full magazine ready to go than a half-empty gun. Imagine you're trying to take down a mangler on Firebase Z and you suddenly get swarmed by a bunch of zombies, but you hadn't reloaded yet. Well, you'll fire into the horde that's surrounding you and you'll run out of ammo and try to reload inside of the horde, and you're basically guaranteed to die. This means you have to buy your perk skin, get another self-revive, etc., all because you didn't hit square on your controller. Tip number 4, watch speedrunners. If you're stuck on a certain part or just having difficulty beating a certain boss, I really recommend watching speedrunners. They have a wealth of information that the average player doesn't, and even more than an expert player. They know spawn information, how long animations are timed, how long things take to load in game, which glitches are available inside of the map that will allow you to cheese a boss or skip a part entirely. While I do prefer to play the way that the devs intended us to play, that doesn't mean that there aren't ways to bend the rules that still fit into their vision. Not to mention, if you want to play the game a different way than I do, go right ahead. It's your experience. Play however you want. If you want to cheese the Nikolai boss fight on Gorod Krovi by using the idolized gobblegum, go right ahead. I know how OCD-inducing it is to not have all those gate worms activated on your UI. 2 of the speedrunners I love to watch are Kingman and Steve or Steve. I don't actually know how to say his name, but they're both phenomenal zombies players, and you can learn a lot from watching all of the wild stuff they do in order for them to achieve the things that they do. They have to learn these maps in great detail, and you can utilize their techniques and combine them with your own to come up with some super fun ways to have a better playthrough. Tip number 5, perks are not that important. So this is a bit of a weird tip, as this really only applies to games that are newer, basically BO3 through present day. I have recently been completing a no perk and no armor challenge inside of Cold War, and I have also done some no perk Easter eggs inside of Black Ops 4 during the life cycle of that game. And something that I've come to quite appreciate and understand is that perks are really a luxury. They're not a necessity. Well, they kind of are in Vanguard because that game is balanced horrifically, but in all the other games, they are really a way to make you overpowered so that you are a dominating powerhouse. Perks matter much more in the older games, but like I said, from around BO3 and onward, there are so many other ways to protect yourself. I really believe that perks become more of a fun luxury than anything else. And I find this to be especially true in games like Black Ops 4 and Cold War because you have some perk features built into the player from the beginning, as well as field upgrades and specialist weapons that will allow you to defend yourself in other ways that perks used to handle. What's really important is armor and shield. If you don't have a shield in Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, and you're guaranteed to get your ass beat. It's just a matter of when. And the same with Cold War. If you don't have armor, your health is just going to get sucked dry. Having the ability to have an armor or shield as protection really is the foundation in which all of the other perks build off of. The zombies are able to hit you from behind as you're retreating, and if you're not protected well, then the defense that your perks are going to give you are going to be expending, thus they are weakening. So always remember to build your shield and keep your armor topped up. Tip number 6, don't be afraid to make your move. Alright, so what I mean by this is don't be afraid to take action. Don't be afraid to get in there and be aggressive. This doesn't mean be reckless, and it doesn't mean to ignore tip number 2. It means be aware of your surroundings, your inventory, and assessing the situation properly to see if you can take a calculated risk. I think the best example to use is boss fights in zombies, just generally speaking. You see, in boss fights, you're attempting to take down a boss, but you have an unending, relentless horde of zombies and sometimes even mini bosses inside of this arena. That makes focusing on the main enemy a bit challenging. And there are many examples of this style of boss fight, from Revelations to Valentina in Mauer der Toten or Legion from Outbreak. The point is, how do you handle the situation in front of you? Let's use Legion from Outbreak. So you have about 8 minutes and a lot of hard enemies to deal with while focusing on Legion's attack pattern. The goal is to weaken his armor and make his electricity orbs fall out of him and then knock down those orbs. What resources are at your disposal and how do you utilize them all effectively so that you can have the ultimate advantage? In this case, you're going to want to train zombies and shoot Legion until he collapses, preferably in an area where he doesn't have his purple clouds hovering around him. Then run over to him as quickly as possible, use Aether Shroud to cloak yourself and rain hellfire into his orb, rinse and repeat. However, this is where the adrenaline usually kicks in and you're gonna get nervous. And I'm telling you, take the risk. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. Just do it again. You'll eventually succeed. Tip number 7. Training methods. When it comes to training, there are many different techniques, and it also depends on which game and which map you're playing that will allow you to apply various techniques that you can use exclusively or in combination. Before we get into the specific techniques, I would like to talk about the separation in the zombies games where training will be slightly different because of the zombie spawns. The line exists between BO3 and BO4. From BO4 onward, the zombies start to spawn in front of you, and I think the reason why they did this is because the maps are so large that it would have been too easy to retreat, as there would be nothing in your path and you could just essentially be safe forever. They also spawn in front of you in Cold War and Vanguard zombies as well, so just be aware when you are hopping from game to game. The other thing that was introduced during the BO4 life cycle maybe was Black Ops 3, but it was super sprinters, and they do mix things up a bit, but they don't come until the higher rounds anyway. I think like 50 plus, so it's not too big of a deal unless you're planning on going to those super high rounds. And if you are, you're probably a pro at this point and you don't even need this video. The first technique we're going to talk about is called hoarding. This is pretty simple and it just requires you to run in a circular-like pattern and put the zombies into a large horde. This is a great technique for high rounding because you can use the elemental ammo mods from the Pack-a-Punch machine to their fullest, as things like Deadwire or Shadow Blast will take out everything in one foul swoop. Then you just rinse and repeat this for as long as you want, until your heart's content, you know? I will say, however, it is tricky when there are a lot of boss zombies involved, especially on maps like Forsaken or 9. There is just so much going on that you can't always focus on the zombies. I recommend taking out the heavy enemies first, or you can wait until the end of the round if you want to be safe, and a way you can do that is by doing whole map training. So what I will do is just run through the entirety of the map in a loop, or I will section off part of the map and create a smaller loop. Surprisingly enough, World War II zombies maps are the best for this technique, but you can do it on any map you want. But again, you have to be careful when you're playing the newer games because zombies will spawn predictively in front of you and ruin your little train you have going on. While you are doing this, you're going to want to run for a little bit, get a nice little horde, then shoot them while moving backward, just like we talked about earlier. The way you should think about hoarding and killing zombies is essentially like chipping away at something slowly. Don't try to get everything at once. Being methodical is much more efficient. Another training technique that I personally like a lot is something I call a tight line. I don't know if there's an actual name for this or not, but that's what I call it because you're running in a tight line. The best way to execute this technique is to be inside of a long rectangular room, and basically you just want to create a thin loop where you lead the zombies and then run towards them on the side and are constantly just killing them. It actually might sound counterintuitive to run into the zombie horde, but it can actually really help keep the zombies closer together so that you don't have a bunch of stragglers out and about ruining things for you. This will also help to prevent the zombies from spawning in front of you, as you will really not be going anywhere other than back and forth inside of whichever room you're in. Another way to train zombies is kind of like snaking them along. This one's a bit hard to to explain, so bear with me. I will have an example on the screen, but I want to explain it anyway. So you're going to want to lure the horde with you and then turn in the opposite direction that you are running. So for example, if you're running with the horde towards the right, rather than turning around by moving your viewfinder to the right, spin around the opposite way, and this will help keep your horde tight and in a line. And you can honestly do this in any shape you want. There are no parameters for this other than your own imagination. All right, now on to the bonus tips section. These bonus tips are about power-ups and when you should be picking them up. It's hard to not go for that max ammo when they are glowing right in your face, but do you actually need to pick them up right away? Well, the answer is yes and no. Let me explain. For max ammos, you always want to grab the power-up when you are almost out of ammo, so you're getting the most bang for your buck. Now, in Cold War, it doesn't really matter as much because you have ammo crates everywhere, but it's still good to practice this technique. In the older games, the max ammo doesn't refill your primary magazine, so you always want to make sure that you reload before you run across the map to pick up the power-up. Double points. Who doesn't love a double points power-up? For these guys, you're going to want to maximize the amount of points you're getting, so if one pops up at the end of the round, it's best to just wait as long as you can before picking it up so that when the next round starts, you're getting double points and getting more kills, rather than wasting it at the end of the round for like 2 zombies. And in game modes like Outbreak, if you have a double points active during one of the main challenges, you will actually get double points for that challenge if you complete it during the double points time window, which is about 30 seconds. That's really cool, and I'm glad that the devs didn't nerf that because you can get a lot of points very quickly if you just time things correctly. Now, for carpenters, it's really not the end of the world if you miss these or pick them up, but in the newer games, basically BO4 and Cold War, they do help replenish your shields and armor, so they are important, but in all of the games on higher rounds, they are actually kind of a detriment to the flow of your game. The Carpenter power-up repairs all of the window boards in the map, and this will stop zombies from spawning in as fast as they normally are and disrupt your training or slow down your game in general. And this can be a big deal if you're into the flow of your train or you're trying to speedrun and are very much into maximizing your time. This can also be said about fire sales as well to some degree. If you hit the box too many times at the first box spawn location, it will move and then you'll start to get fire sale power-ups. And this will actually make it harder to get the good stuff like max ammos, insta-kills, and double points as you now have introduced another power-up into the RNG mix, so just be aware and be careful. As far as insta-kills go, there isn't too much strategy for them. They are good for killing bosses in the higher rounds and taking out tons of zombies in the higher rounds as well. But in the early rounds, the only thing they're really good for is knifing with the double points, which in the older games matters a lot, whereas in the newer games, it's important but not nearly as clutch of a play as in something like Black Ops 1 or Black Ops 2. And lastly, we have the nuke power-up. This is probably my least favorite power-up. It kills everything on the map and only gives you 400 points, which is not that great of a trade-off. It gets in the way, it's disruptive, it isn't helpful until the higher rounds. So my recommendation with this is not to pick it up until the end of the round, until after all the zombies have died, so you basically just get a free 400 points. Or if you like them in the later rounds, be careful because like Carpenters, they will disrupt your train and many other elements of your game flow and progression. And yes, I know that there are armor drops and death machines and perk bottles that you can pick up, but those are more of like extra drops. They don't really have too much strategy to them other than to use them or to not use them. So maybe you disagree, and if you do, let people know in the comments why they are so great and give them some strategies to boot. Us zombies vets gotta help the noobs get their footing, you know? Alrighty guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Are there any tips or tricks that you think I missed or that have helped you over the years? I hope that this video helps you in some way, shape, or form, and remember that these tips and tricks can be combined and altered in any way that you want to. You can copy everything I say, or you can take it and come up with your own methods. Let's do our best to help this next generation of zombies fans, so please leave your ideas in the comments right below that like button. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out everybody.